Thus far, Ezekiel had been staging the siege of Jerusalem. But before the 430 days are completed, he received a vision of the abominations in the temple and of the coming slaughter of the inhabitants of Jerusalem. When the vision ended, Ezekiel told the exiles all the things that the Lord had shown him. Continued to lie on his right for the remaining 17 days as a sign to Judah. Began staging the siege outcomes by cutting and dividing his hair into 3 parts. And then preached the sermons in chapters 6 and 7. Did the exiles believe what Ezekiel told them? We are not told specifically as to what was their response. From what was written in chapters 12 to 14, we will guess backwards. Infer as to the attitude of the exiles towards the vision that Ezekiel saw. We will discover that the exiles were skeptical of what Ezekiel told them.
God's judgment was that the people have eyes to see, but do not see, ears to hear, but do not hear, for they are a rebellious house.
The Lord commanded Ezekiel to act out a prophecy for the exiles, and hopefully, they would understand even though they are a rebellious people. What was this action sermon? And why this might work while others did not?
Ezekiel did so, as he had been commanded. By day he brought out his baggage like the baggage of an exile. Then in the evening he dug through the wall of his house with his hands. He went out in the dark and carried the baggage on his shoulder in the sight of the exiles.
The phrase "in their sight" is repeated 7 times in Ezekiel 12 verses 3 to 7. It is a wordplay on the exiles having eyes that do not see. This prophecy gave specific details concerning what would happen to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, especially the prince in Jerusalem, which was then King Zedekiah, Ezekiel 12 verse 10. Ezekiel was going into exile. He was a sign of what would happen to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, that they would likewise go into captivity, Ezekiel 12 verse 11.
The prophecy concerning the prince was that the Lord would bring him to Babylon, yet he will not see Babylon, though he will die there.
How is it possible that the prince would be taken to Babylon yet would not see Babylon?
2 Kings 25 is a record of what eventually happened. The city of Jerusalem was broken into. All the men of war, including King Zedekiah, tried to escape by night. But the Babylonian army captured the king in the plains of Jericho and brought him to the king of Babylon at Riblah. There they gouged out his eyes, and Zedekiah could not see. Zedekiah was subsequently taken to Babylon, where he died, Jeremiah 52 verse 11.
In Ezekiel's prophecy, the prince would cover his face, probably so that no one would recognize him. But it was a sign of Zedekiah's blindness.
Where was Zedekiah when he was captured? Who captured him?
Though it was the Babylonian army that captured Zedekiah, it was God who sovereignly brought it to pass. God declared some 5 years earlier that he would snare Zedekiah in his net, Ezekiel 12 verse 13.
Where was Zedekiah when he was blinded?
He was at Riblah. Notice from the map that Riblah was located at the northeast extremity of Canaan. Earlier in Ezekiel's vision, God declared that he would judge the leaders of Jerusalem to the border of Israel, Ezekiel 11 verses 10 to 11.
From 2 Kings 25 verses 18 to 21, we learn that 72 leaders of Jerusalem were also struck down at Riblah, including the chief priest, the second priest, other temple officials, an overseer and a scribe of the army and the king's advisers. Why would this prophecy of what would happen to the inhabitants of Jerusalem be of significance to the exiles in Babylon?
The coming judgment on the inhabitants of Jerusalem declared to the exiles that they would not be going home to Jerusalem. In fact, there would be no Jerusalem, no home to go back to. Rather, a few would join them in exile. Probably soon after the exile of King Jehoiakim, also known as Jeconiah, Jeremiah wrote a letter to the exiles telling them,
"Build houses and live in them, and plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and become the fathers of sons and daughters. And take wives for your sons, and give your daughters to husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters. And multiply there and do not decrease. Seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf. For in its welfare you will have welfare."
it was important that the exiles have families, to have children, so there would be people available to return to Judea when the captivity ended. Ezekiel's next action sermon requires him to eat and drink while shaking and trembling, as if in fear. This was to signify to the inhabitants of Jerusalem that they would be eating and drinking with anxiety and horror, not knowing when would be their next meal. Because the whole land would be devastated, from the wilderness to Riblah. Earlier in Ezekiel 4, God promised that there would be rationing of bread and water. Now the message is that there would be no food. Note that this action sermon was delivered on the 5th day of the 6th month, in the 6th year of the exile. The siege of Jerusalem has not begun. The siege happened some 3 years later, in the 10th day of the 10th month, in the 9th year of the exile, Ezekiel 24 verses 1 to 2. The reality of the siege and the consequent famine would be far worse. The inhabitants of Jerusalem would be wasting away. And there would be cannibalism, boiling their own children for food. Despite Ezekiel's action sermons and sharing of the departure of God's glory from the temple, the exiles did not believe Ezekiel. In fact, there was a proverb circulating that the passing of time has proved that every prophecy turns out to be false. Life goes on, unchanged, so why worry? God declares that He would cause this proverb to cease, because time is coming for the fulfillment of every prophecy. Previously, the people said, every prophecy is false. Now they said, the prophecies are true, but they will be fulfilled many years from now. So don't worry, just carry on whatever you are doing. God declares that the fulfillment of the prophecies would no longer be delayed. What He said, He will do. But when would God do it? In Ezekiel 6 verse 10, God said that He will do what He said. Now in Ezekiel 12 verse 25, God revealed that He would do it in their days, that is, in their lifetime.
Do you believe Jesus will be coming back? Do you believe that He is returning soon? Or do you think that it will be a long time before He comes back?
It has been about 2,000 years since Jesus ascended to heaven. You may say, all these years, He did not come back. Everything continues just like before. It looks like He is not coming back. This is like saying, I will not die, because all these years, I did not die. You know, this is ridiculous. Jesus is coming back. It may happen at any moment. But this is not always on our mind. And we are not watchful of the way we live our lives. Our decisions repeated over time determine our character. Who we are now often determines who we would be when Christ returns. As now, so then. When Christ returns, he will judge both the dead and the living. The point of application is, examine our lives and change while there is time.